Protesters were greatly inspired by the exemplary lives of the Sikh gurus, as well as by their teachings and their writings which were recited every day at the protest sites. The Adi Granth, the Sikh sacred scripture, is the focal point of collective worship. They were also inspired by heroic figures and shaheeds and martyrs, such as Banda Bahadur, who brought Delhi Sarkar, so at the time in the 18th century it was the Mughal, to its knees and redistributed land to the peasantry. Sikh liturgy commemorates Sikh martyrs, which were celebrated at all the protest sites. Of particular significance to the protesters were the two young children of Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru, who were bricked alive by the Mughals. So this is illustrated by this quotation from an interview with a protester at Tikri, saying, "My biggest inspiration comes from the children of the 10th Guru. They were young children with dreams and aspirations which they sacrificed for the protection of the faith. Their example keeps me in Chardi Kala." Chardi Kala is a very important notion. It means high spirits, eternal optimism, resilience, and this acceptance of adversity comes from the acceptance of God's will. This aspect of Sikh ethos was really omnipresent at the borders. Protest sites, interestingly, were also sites of deeply spiritual, even mystical experiences, including in Tikri, which is, as I said earlier, usually depicted as a stronghold of the leftist farmers' union. In Tikri, I met a farmer who told me, for instance, how he felt deeply at peace in the protest site, how he felt that it was actually the first guru who was running the site itself. Or another protester narrating that several of them caught sight on several occasions of the Baz, so the falcon of the 10th Guru, flying over Tikri and protecting them. Here you have a portrait of Guru Gobind Singh, who was known to practice falconry and who is traditionally represented with a Baz, with a falcon, as a symbol of his royal status. So you see here this extraordinarily rich cultural universe, borrowing from Sikh history of struggle, of survival, from the lineage of the gurus and the shaheeds, the martyrs, borrowing from this very important notion of Chardi Kala, eternal optimism in adversity, how this rich Sikh universe has infused the farmers with strength, extraordinary dedication to the movement, and the determination to fight till the end. So their frame of mind was win or die. And here you have a photo I took in Tikri, a photo of a poster that was pasted on a farmer's trolley. We don't surrender, we win or die. Let me now finish by discussing another influence besides the major influence of Sikhism. One shouldn't forget to highlight the importance of leftist farmers' unions and left ideology in the Kisan Andolan, in the farmers' protest. And the success of the movement is actually the result of a unique blend of Sikhism and Marxism, and this is precisely what I will address now. Very briefly about the history of the left and radical politics in Punjab. So radical politics, generally speaking, has been a constant feature of 20th century Punjab. And radical politics in Punjab is usually posited on two poles that are normally considered as irreconcilable, namely Marxism and religious nationalism, which we can also call religious fundamentalism. What is interesting is those two opposite influences, these opposite forces entered in a strategic alliance during the Kisan Andolan. Obviously, this alliance, and I will talk a little bit about it, was riddled with tensions, contradictions, and even at times with conflicts. But let me discuss in a bit more detail those two poles. The religious nationalist one first, and by that I mean actually the Khalistan militancy, which fought for a separate Sikh state in the 1980s and the 1990s, before being wiped out from Punjab by state repression. Khalistan imagery and slogans were visible in Singhu, however they were totally absent from Tikri, which is, as you have understood, the stronghold of the leftist unions. So there would be a lot to say about the enduring relevance of the Khalistan ideal among certain sections of Sikhs, both in Punjab and even more so in the diaspora. Let me here simply argue that Khalistan symbolizes Sikh national aspirations as well as a persistent defiance of the center. And this defiance of the center, I have already discussed, has been shaped by Sikh collective memory of traumatic events, as I have already discussed. So this very deep distrust, this defiance of Delhi and of the rulers at the center have represented a very prominent dimension of the Kisan Andolan, of the farmers' protest, that cut across generation and ideological divides. Let me now say a few words about the other pole of the protest, the left, ideological pole of the protest, the left in Punjab. So the genealogy of the left dates back to the Gadar movement that was created in California by Punjabi immigrants in 1913. And this movement, this Gadar movement, was merging anti-colonial struggle and socialist ideals. Next important step in the history of the left is the creation of the Communist Party in 1920. And let me come also to the main figure of the left in Punjab and beyond Punjab, namely Bhagat Singh, who was born a Sikh. He was a socialist, a self-proclaimed atheist, who was executed at the young age of 23 by the British for his violent anti-colonial actions. The legacy of Bhagat Singh in contemporary Punjab and contemporary India is quite fascinating actually, because Bhagat Singh has become a household name. A folk hero is considered as a martyr, referred to as Shahid-e-Azam, the great martyr, and is basically nowadays reclaimed by everyone, every party in India, not only the communists, but also Sikh nationalists and even supporters of Hindutva are reclaiming Bhagat Singh. So here you can see on the visuals of Bhagat Singh, his portrait was widely displayed both at Tikri and Singhu. And what is interesting is on the photo on the left, he is placed in between the Sikh warrior and hero of the 18th century, Banda Bahadur, and Che Guevara. And on this photo, on this poster, Bhagat Singh is represented wearing a turban. And this representation here of Bhagat Singh on the left is the standard representation in Punjab. But next to it, You have an actual photo of Bhagat Singh, clean-shaven with a moustache and wearing a hat. And I just told you that Bhagat Singh was born a Sikh indeed, but became an atheist. He even authored a pamphlet entitled "Why Am I an Atheist?" And he had discarded the external symbol of Sikhism, including the beard and the turban. So let me now move to another important stage in this brief history of the left in Punjab with the Naxalite movement. The Naxalite movement emerged as an armed peasant revolt and insurgent movement in West Bengal in the late 1960s. It became quite influential in Punjab in the 60s and 70s among the rural masses as well as among the students before being suppressed first by the state, the Punjab government, and then by Khalistani militants. So you can see here that the tensions between those two poles, ideological poles within the farmers' movement, are grounded in that conflictual history. What is important to highlight is that the Punjabi variant of the Naxalite movement has left a rather strong imprint on sections of society that were at the forefront of the Kisan Andolan, of the farmers' protest, particularly on some of the farmers' unions themselves and other unions that supported the movement, on students, teachers, lawyers, journalists, intellectuals. So these people have formed the operational backbone of the movement. They have created a parallel communication ecosystem to respond to government and mainstream media propaganda that routinely vilify the farmers, labeling them as Khalistanis, as Naxalites, or manipulated by Pakistan, and so on. So the parallel ecosystem, communication ecosystem that they created comprised the movement's own IT cell that was very active on social media. It comprised a newspaper called the Trolley Times, available in 3 languages. There were also several YouTube channels broadcasting live programs, the live programs that were happening on the various stages of the protest sites, as well as union leaders' interviews and the daily press statements of the SKM, Samyut Kisan Morcha, that was the umbrella organization of the farmers' unions leading the protest. So, to go back to the 2 main ideological undercurrents of the farmers' protest, what opposed them and what united them. So, you had one section of the movement that was promoting Sikh identity politics. I prefer actually to use that term, promoters of Sikh identity politics, instead of the term of Khalistanis, because it has been quite distorted, including by the government during this protest. So on one side you had promoters of Sikh identity politics, and on the other side you had the leftist and secular section among the protesters, represented by the farmers' unions settled in Tikri mostly, and also represented by many city-based activists. So these groups, these two groups, these two ideological trends were separated by a huge gap, a recent history of violence and mistrust. To tell you the truth, the term of comrade is usually not a compliment in Punjab. But despite all this conflictual history, those two groups shared 3 important positionings. And let me tell you those, what they shared in common. Firstly, they shared the same anti-central government rhetoric, irrespective of the party in power in Delhi. This is something also I have discussed, I have highlighted how central this anti-Delhi the distrust of Delhi is central in Sikh and Punjabi collective memory and psyche. Secondly, both groups, both sections were and still are staunchly opposed to the Hindutva, so the Hindu nationalist project of transforming the secular, multicultural and composite fabric of India and imposing, particularly to minorities, a Hindu state, a Hindu Rashtra. Both groups strongly oppose, like most Sikhs actually, the Hindu nationalists' attempts at reclaiming Sikh identity as part of the Hindu fold. So this second aspect was very strong and was a very strong component of the Kisan Andolan, of the farmers' protest. Thirdly, both factions were equally opposed to the law, and that was a prerequisite, obviously, not only to the laws, but also to the neoliberal and corporate agenda of the current government. So these were obviously very strong uniting factors that helped the two factions or the two groups overcome their history of tensions and disagreements. So, since I have laid so far a lot of emphasis on the religious dimension of the farmers' protest, let me now say a few words about the essential role played by the unions and particularly the leftist unions. Firstly, the farmers' unions have clarified for the average farmer the content and impact of the laws and how it would have affected them personally. At a very initial stage of the movement, as early as September 2020, the laws were translated in Punjabi, they were debated regularly in local newspapers, union members toured tirelessly the villages of Malwa, which is the southern belt of Punjab, where farmers' unions are particularly strong. So they toured those villages to inform villagers, raise awareness about the laws. They also initiated thousands of actions at the local level, such as road blockades, rallies, and actions targeting showrooms and mobile towers of Ambani and Adani, the two Indian mega corporate groups close to the central government and who would have arguably benefited the most from the laws. Here I would like us to have a look at this photo, which I took at Singhu border in March 2020. It's a satirical banner of a Marxist Federation of Trade Unions that supported the protest. And here we have, on the left, Prime Minister Modi standing next to Ambani and Adani, the three of them depicted as agents of the East India Company or a contemporary version of the East India Company. The unions, the farmers' unions, played also an important role in shaping and popularizing the anti-corporate, anti-capitalist, anti-Hindutva narratives of the protest. They played an equally important role in establishing alliances with other struggle and other movements, either at the Indian national level or at the global level. So, for example, the Kisan Andolan got the support of the Via Campesina, which is an international movement representing small farmers, also fighting against the corporatization and liberalization of agriculture. Finally, if landless laborers and women have had a space in the movement, albeit with a limited impact, but still they have had some visibility and they took part in the movement, it is primarily due to the progressist leftist union. Most importantly, the unions managed to channel the intense emotions of the protesters. their anger, their fear after being attacked by BJP-supported vigilante groups, as it happened several times in Singhu border. The weariness they felt after months of facing the rain, the cold, the heat. So the unions managed to channel those emotions into a resolve shared by all the protesters that the movement had to remain peaceful because it was their only chance to succeed. So here, this is where the combination of Marxism and Sikhism, of Sikh religious ethos and leftist ideals of social justice proved a unique and tremendously powerful resource, accounting for the success of the movement. As I hope I have shown, this was not without challenges, without tensions, as is demonstrated in this quote from an interview with a leader of one of the main leftist unions, BKU Ugraon. So here I quote him: "Khalistani elements try to capture the stage, even the whole protest, but we stopped them. We made the people understand that this is a fight for Zameen, for the land, and for Roti, for food, not for Dharam, religion. It was a fight within the fight." So here you can see how different narratives, perspectives, different influences, different politics even ran through this movement. What is really striking in what this leader says is what he calls the fight within the fight, and how he analyzes the movement as a fight for Zameen and Roti, a fight for land and food, not for Dharam, not for religion. Whereas I have tried to argue earlier that for most of the protesters I have interviewed, Zameen and Dharam, so land and religion, are inseparable. And the laws they mobilized against for 1 year were perceived by them as an existential threat, both on Sikh identity and on agriculture. And I will finish my talk on these ambiguities and challenges that make the Kisan Andolan, the Indian farmers' protest, such a fascinating case study for scholars. And for activists also, because there are probably quite a few lessons to be learned, since ultimately, despite all the odds, despite its limitations, despite repeated attempts at derailing it and even crushing it with the use of violence, this protest was successful.